Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to get started with EasyTalk and quickly get a dialogue system up and running. So the first thing that we need is a UI to show the player the dialogue. It's probably pretty obvious. So if we click on Okie Dokie Games folder, EasyTalk, Prefabs, Dialogue Displays, you'll see this screen space folder. And in here we have all of our prefabs for the default layouts that come with EasyTalk for different dialogue UI displays. So I'm just going to randomly choose one. You can choose whichever one you want and drag it over into the hierarchy over here. So in this case, I have at the bottom here, I have the area where lines of dialogue will be shown. Then right here, my names of my characters will be shown. Over here on the right, I have a button basically that will prompt the player whenever they're allowed to continue to the next line of dialogue. And right here I have my options buttons for whenever dialogue options are displayed to the player. The next thing that we need is a dialogue controller. Dialogue controllers basically take your dialogue, they process it, keep track of the state of the dialogue, and they send information to the dialogue UI about what's going on and what to display, like the text or the options or whatever. A lot of times you'll have one dialogue controller per character, but you might have dialogue controllers that are used for multiple characters all at once. For example, you might have two people standing around talking to each other, and you just want one dialogue controller for that kind of scenario a lot of times. In this case though, for this tutorial, we're just going to have one simple dialogue controller. So right click in the hierarchy, go to create empty, and we're going to name this to dialogue controller. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a dialogue controller component. So click on the add component button and search for dialogue controller. And here it is here, so I'm just going to click on that to add a dialogue controller component. And we have some settings here. We're just going to ignore these for the moment. And the next thing that we need is a dialogue asset. So the dialogue asset contains our actual lines of dialogue for our character, or multiple characters in some cases. Depending on the game that you're making, you can do it however you want really. But it contains your lines of dialogue and options and special dialogue logic and all your paths and things like that. And basically the controller takes that dialogue asset, and when you call play dialogue on the controller, then it jumps into the dialogue and plays it back and handles all that logic for you. So we're going to create a dialogue asset. I'm just going to create it in the assets folder. Right click in the project browser, go to create, EasyTalk, dialogue, and I'm just going to name this to Hello World. And if you double click on the dialogue asset, then that will bring up the EasyTalk node editor, and this is where you can edit your dialogues. So the first thing that we need is we need an entry node. The entry node is where dialogue playback begins. So if you hold the Alt key down, you'll get this quick create menu, and then click on entry up here. So we have an entry node now, and we're going to just click on that and drag it up to the top left of our node editor. And you can zoom in and out using the mouse wheel, or you can use the view menu up here at the top. The next thing that we need is a conversation node. Conversation nodes contain all of our lines of dialogue. Hold down the Alt key and click on Convo. This is a conversation node. We're going to connect our entry node to our conversation node by clicking and dragging on the output port. Conversation nodes can have multiple lines of dialogue within them. So if you click on the plus button at the top left, you can add lines, or click the minus buttons to remove lines. You can type the name of the character right here. In this case, we're just going to type tutorial. And in the text, we're just going to have one line that says Hello World. Now, the last thing that we need for our very simple dialogue is an exit node. So the exit node tells the dialogue controller that playback should exit, and then it will send signals to the dialogue UI, and depending on your settings for the UI will probably hide itself or clear out the text or whatever it's set up to do. So let's add an exit node. Hold down the Alt key and choose exit, and we're going to just move it over here and connect it to the output port of our conversation node. Now save by hitting Control S or going to File and Save. And we can just dock this up here next to our game view. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set up our controller to play our dialogue. So we're going to select our controller, and then we can click this field here, and we can choose our dialog asset, or we can drag and drop it into the field. So now we need a way to actually start the playback of our dialog by calling play dialog on our controller. You can do that from a script, you can do it from events, you can do it a lot of different ways, but for this tutorial, we're just gonna add a button and have it where when we click the button, it calls play dialog. Right click in the hierarchy, go to UI and choose Canvas, and then right click on Canvas, go to UI, and then go to Legacy and Button. Then expand the button, choose text, and we're going to change the text to play dialog. And now choose the button, and just over here in the scene view, because this button is sort of over part of the dialog UI, I'm just going to move this, so make sure it's selected, make sure you're in 2D mode, and hit F to zoom in on the button. And then if you choose the move tool, you can move the button out of the way somewhere. Okay. And then the last thing I need to do is I need to add an on-click event here. So click the plus button, drag and drop the dialog controller into this field. And then for the function, we're going to choose dialog controller, play dialog. Now, if I go to play mode, you can see that our dialog display is hidden automatically on awake because it's set to do that. If I click on play dialog, then it plays our dialogue briefly, and then it disappears. And the reason that it disappears so quickly is because the only text we have in there is hello world, and our dialog controller is set to autoplay mode. In autoplay mode, the dialog controller automatically tries to continue to the next line of dialogue after a certain amount of time, or after the audio for that line is finished playing, if you have audio for your lines of dialogue. And that the period of time is based on how long the text is in the line and the settings that are in your dialog UI components. Let's change this to wait for command mode, and you'll see the difference. If we click play dialog again, you'll see after a short delay, this continue button shows up, but our dialogue stays shown until we click continue, and then it will be hidden. Okay, so I'm going to click the stop button to exit play mode, and then the last thing I want to show you is how to add options to your dialogue. So if you go back into the node editor, we're going to move our exit node down here to the bottom right somewhere, and we're going to disconnect it from our conversation node by right clicking on one of the ports, and we're going to add in an option node. So hold down the Alt key and go to option, click that once, and we're going to connect this to our conversation node. So just drag that to there. In the option node, just like the conversation node, you can have multiple options. Just click the plus button to add more options, and click the minus buttons to delete options. We're just going to have 2 for this tutorial. So in the first one, we're going to type option 1, and in the second one, we're going to type option 2. And we could just connect the option node, both options, to the exit, and then the dialog playback would exit as soon as we click on an option. We're not going to do that for this tutorial. Instead, we're going to add 2 conversation nodes, 1 for each option. So hold the Alt key again, click Convo twice to give yourself 2 conversation nodes, and then we're going to connect each option to a conversation node. And then we're going to connect each of our conversation nodes to our exit node. Now we're going to enter some text for each conversation node. For this one, I'm going to just say you chose option 1. And let's just add another line here. We'll say congratulations. And then for this one, you chose option 2. And for the name, you don't actually have to type it each time. You can click on this arrow and you'll get a drop down of any characters in this dialogue. So we already entered tutorial, so we can choose that here again. And this one I'm just going to leave blank. And you'll also notice you can drag and drop audio files onto these little speaker icons to add audio for your text. So anyway, I don't have any audio for this tutorial, so I'm just going to save this and go back to the game view, click on play. And let's go ahead and change this back to wait for command mode actually. And now let's click on play dialogue. And you'll see now it pops up with two options. If I choose option 1, it says you chose option 1, and then if I click on continue, it says congratulations. And if I click continue again, it exits the dialogue. So if you look at the dialogue, you can get a feel for how that all works. And then if we go back and click play dialogue again and choose option 2, then it says you chose option 2, and then it exits. So yeah, hopefully you learned something and you can go make something cool and fun. See you next time.